Thank you so much for agreeing to be part of this interview series, and I'm really excited to welcome you here. And before I start off, I do want to, briefly introduce you. Fanny Huang, Vice President, Strategic Deals, Head of ESG, APAC, DHL Supply Chain. In the supply chain division of DHL, Fanny's role involves managing transformational business opportunities for Asia Pacific and overseeing the sustainability agenda for the region. She's also the DEIB sponsor for DHL Supply Chain APAC. I'm going to ask you questions on how you started your career, what were some of the twists, some of the risks that you took, what have been some of the biggest challenges, what are some of the insights. If you were to look back, what would your advice be to your younger self?
Sounds good.
Great. So let's start with, when you started your career, did you think you will end up where you are now? Did you really plan it that way?
No, not at all, Ritu. Given that I studied chemical engineering, I have a bachelor's and master's degree, and I started on my career with a government agency in Singapore, never did I imagine that I'll be doing what I do today. So, clearly life has had its sort of surprising twists and turns, yeah.
Wow. So chemical engineer, how did you land where you are right now? So walk us through the journey of it. Yes.
So I studied engineering because I wanted a technical degree. I liked math. I liked chemistry. I put them together and say, okay, let's just do chemical engineering, right? Probably sort of a useful degree to have. But I was given a scholarship, so I went back to the government for a couple of years. I guess the surprising twists and turns, so to speak, probably happened at 2 points in my life. In 2014. I decided to relocate to London to join my then fiancé and now husband. And so therefore I had to change my job, right? From changing geography first from Singapore to London, and then at the same time changing sort of my career path from the public sector to the private sector at the same time. The second twist or turn probably happened in 2017, where we then decided to move back to Singapore for personal family reasons. And then again, I switched and I ended up joining DHL, where I am right now.
Wow. Okay. So I'm going to ask you 2 follow-up questions on that. So 2014,
Okay.
Firstly, the geographical shift, right, from Singapore to London and working there. Was that your first overseas assignment in terms of working?
No, I was actually based in London before that for
Okay.
about 3 years with the Singapore government agency. And that was where sort of I met my husband at the time. So it wasn't, but the working environment and context was different.
Yes.
Working for a London branch, so to speak, of a Singapore organization, versus then going back the second time and sort of ingraining myself in a very British, but also very European or international working culture in an organization.
Right.
In London. So that was quite different,
Yeah.
really, from an experience perspective.
What were 2 or 3 things that come to your mind that were different during between the two?
The first noticeable difference probably is, so I'm not by any means, so to speak, a quiet person, but I think being an Asian in a very international working culture overseas, I quite quickly realized that it was hard to speak up. It was really, really hard to speak up. And this was sort of in my younger days where everyone, this was a management consulting role, so everyone had something to say. And it was really, really difficult to find my voice, to speak up in a crowd where everyone was dying to say something. So I think that was one where I really had to force myself and get out of the comfort zone to say something. Because as a management consultant, if you don't get to say something, you're very, very quickly out of a job. So I think that was probably one big shift for me. The second difference was when my first time in London, it was still a very Asia-centric, so to speak, nature of the job, where I was looking at foreign direct investment into Singapore. So I took a more Singapore Asia-centric view of the world. But the second time when I went back to London, that was obviously rooting myself into a UK organization working on European supply chain jobs, so projects, and therefore very, very different perspective from a business environment as well as the sort of topics in discussion. So that's sort of probably the two main differences.
Okay. Which kind of leads me to my next question on, especially the part about finding it hard to speak up, finding your voice. How did you navigate that? Because that is one of the challenges that, we see quite prevalent even today in the Asian context, and especially women leaders, since the interview is focused on women leaders. How did you navigate that?
So I think it starts with self-awareness. So I knew that my personality trait, it's what we call cool blue. So I'm analytical by nature. So I often listen to what the others have to say. And then somewhere in the middle or even towards the end, I come in either to express a different view or I try to frame the different points of view and to guide the session along. So you have to find your space where it's not necessarily coming with a new idea, sexy idea per se, that no one else has thought of. Some people are good at that. But my strength is in framing ideas and framing thoughts. So that's where I time myself. That's where active listening works, to gather that. And then you find that opportunity to then speak up. So I think that's just some tips and tricks in terms of self-awareness and how to navigate.
Yeah, I love that because you said self-awareness and also really finding what's your strength. So you don't need to become that vocal person right from tomorrow, but at least you know what your strengths are. In your case, you said you could synthesize the conversation and, and kind of analyze and maybe come in between. That's a great tool and building self-awareness, right? So thank you for sharing that. As you look back at your career, what have been the top 2 or 3 challenges, because we've all faced challenges in our long careers. What have been your top 2, 3 challenges?
One of the challenges, and remains the case, is networking. I'm not a natural networker. Some people, and what I mean is, so I'm friendly, I like to chat with people, but I'm not very intentional and deliberate in the way of forming connections, professional relationships, with sort of that mutual interest in mind, because you hear that a lot, it's like, oh, women, you need to network. Women or men in your professional career network. But when you're not naturally comfortable with it, you could overdo it. You come across as, not authentic. And it shows. So I think for me, what I focus on then is just, like I said, focus on people, not the opportunity. So I'm just generally interested in people. I focus on people, active listening, which I talk about, and just keeping a tighter group of people that I'm more comfortable with, and that's okay, and it is not about sort of casting the net very wide. So I found sort of that pace that I'm comfortable, and I think that's where I work with.
But do you think, looking at your career, do you think networking is that important, or do we kind of give it too much importance? Like, what's your view on that?
For me personally, may sound a little bit controversial. I don't think that networking has been that important. From a personal, self-driven perspective.
Sure.
I think what did balance it off is recognizing that the networking, so networking is sort of a self-initiated, right? Building connections. But the balance to that is I've also come to appreciate, I'm grateful for over the years, right? For ex-bosses, bosses today, stakeholders, etc. That there are people out there who want us to succeed, who wants me to be successful. Who's willing to invest in me. And sometimes they are the ones who initiate and create that network, if that makes sense. So when I wanted a mentor, I asked for it and they said, okay, how about this person or that person? They've said, Fanny, you should get to know so-and-so. So there's some of these nudges and prodding that has come about that I'm grateful for, that I think has helped a lot without me having to do too much personally from an intentional networking perspective. Sure. Not everyone is fortunate to have that, but I do appreciate I've had those opportunities and I'm grateful for that.
No, I think you make a really good point because networking and connections, I mean, as per me, I think networking is the broader term, but building connections is really the essence of it, and as you said, maybe you built connections with these people, with your ex-bosses, your current bosses, stakeholders. they in turn then nudged you to maybe, or they in turn opened their network, right? And that actually is a good way. But very often we don't think of that when we think of network. We just think of like going to these big networking events and big conferences and it puts off people. Really good point.
The second challenge is finding balance. So in recent years now, I found my groove. I'm very, very comfortable, but that was not the case a couple of years ago. So one of the reasons why I went to London and then came back to Singapore 3 years later was precisely because I couldn't find a balance. So at the time I was doing a management consulting role. I had one young child born in London, and I was really struggling as an employee and as a mother, because if the nature of the job meant 4 days a week, I would be living out of a suitcase somewhere in Europe on a client project. I had a young child, no family support, no sort of a strong child-minding network. And then I was really, really, really stuck. And I was unhappy at home and also at work. So that was a real challenge for me. And the solution was a big move, but an easy one. I just changed my job. I had one of those Christmas, New Year resolution, difficult conversations with my husband. He said, change, find something that will make you happy, whether in London or in Singapore. In February 2017, 2 months later, I got a job offer by DHL, a bit of serendipity there. And then by May, we relocated. So all in 9 months, I sort of just shifted. And then I found the balance since, right? So I think do something about it. That's always one solution to get around it.
No, on a lighter side, I'm also hearing, find the right spouse. I mean, the fact that your husband was willing to relocate with you, right?
I think that what Sheryl Sandberg said, right? I think one of the biggest decisions you make in your career or something is who you marry. And I'm paraphrasing that, but that wasn't part of my decision making when I married him years ago. But all in hindsight, right? It really made a lot of difference. He's been an extremely supportive partner, and that made a big difference. Yeah,
that's right. Finding a great, supporting spouse is key. But apart from that, what are some of the things that as women leaders we can do more or better off in terms of creating a little bit of that system around us?
I think finding a routine definitely helps. I think we all know this, being as women having to be a little bit militaristic. I think that's inevitable. I think secondly, setting some boundaries comes to work. How much I can travel, and when I don't travel, being more present to focus on some of the other things I need to take care of. It's just little things like that. And I think when that balance is not in place, have that confidence also to speak up. I think we all we like to compartmentalize, sort of work and personal, but the reality is that the line fuzzes, right? I know, maybe again take sort of an Asian work ethics and mindset, right? It's sort of long hours. I've got to work very hard for the job. It's about, but I think that mindset philosophy has changed in Singapore and a lot of different, and not in all, depending on obviously the employer you work for, organizational culture, etc. But I am fortunate that I think in DHL we talk a lot about a culture of results and respect. There is results, yes, of course, as an organization or as business, but the respect for boundaries, family first, and all this. So finding the right organization that partners you to do that and achieve that, and listening, I think that helps.
Yeah, I think you really made, again, a great point about finding the right organization and also speaking up. Sometimes I guess we don't give, or we give less credit to our managers or our peers or whoever we are working with, the teams, in terms of that they won't understand what we are going through. But if we share, there are chances they might, they'll support us.
And it's one of those reflections for myself as I progress. I never thought too much about it, but we are all in a way role models for the others around us. And unless we seek to find a balance and role model that, it's going to be very hard for others to follow, to find their voice, especially younger in the journey. So I think that's just one of those reminders to ourselves. Yeah, always.
Yeah, yes, exactly. Because you're right. Because a lot of younger women, sometimes I speak with them and they're like, oh, yeah, but I do want to do this, but then I have to make a choice. Then maybe I delay doing this, delay doing that on the personal front. But if they find enough role models, successful women leaders, successful in their own terms, so that they
Yeah.
think it's not
Yeah.
necessarily one or the other. It can be this
Yeah.
and that, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So,
A bit of the analogy I like to use. I do enjoy driving. It's sort of like stepping on the accelerator, right? There will be seasons in life where you step a little bit harder and you like to, sort of speed and race a bit. And then there are times when you let go too. So I think what's most important is that when you are in control on when to step and when you release, then that's all right. The balance is there. It's when you feel you can't, then obviously not. And there's nothing wrong with going faster and slower at different times and seasons in your life.
has there been time where you thought you're going to get support from this quarter and you did not get, or where you thought you might not get support here, but you ended up getting really good support? Could be organization, outside, anything. But were there any surprises like that?
I think that many women leaders you speak to where, they would tell you that they have sort of very deliberately maybe navigated their career. And so I was the complete opposite. I'm driven to do well in whatever I do. But I've never been particularly ambitious or very clear in terms of how to navigate my career. I've always been sort of a blank slate. So if I may, the biggest surprise to me always have been that I've moved because of life decisions, and the people that offered me the roles in what I do, the moves I've done, they have trusted in me more than I really knowing what I wanted, if that sort of makes sense. So when I joined a management consultancy, I wasn't a management consultant before, but something they saw in me felt that I could do that role. So I went over. And then when I joined DHL, where I am right now, I wasn't a logistician when I was offered the role, and sort of I joined. So that's been a lot of sort of serendipity in my career, and it's okay. And I sort of want to say for some of you out there, sort of figuring out, and it's okay. And surprises have happened, and I think people have seen in me and given me the opportunities, and I've just made sure that I reciprocated that, right? And I've done well in what I do. I try my best to do well in what I do, and that made it work.
You're saying it's all about people seeing that potential in you, and giving you those opportunities. What would you say is role of an organization in supporting their women leaders? Like what, or maybe is there more of a role they can play, or to what extent do they play a role in helping women leaders flourish and succeed?
So I like this because I think you previously introduced me as the diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging sponsor for supply chain division in APAC as well, and in DHL. So I think what I need to set the scene first is that it does take time to change. It is an evolution. I think we need to recognize that. The awareness and the discussion is quite critical from a culture change perspective. When there's more male than female, unconscious bias naturally happens across. And I think just raising that unconscious bias is important. So for us, all the leaders have to go through unconscious bias training as a start, right? And that helps. So you can go, there's unconscious bias in there. Everyone gets it. The language, people, when you call it out, they recognize, that's true. I didn't think of it that way. So some of these things will start to progress. Secondly, in my many conversations with women, I do recognize that the imposter syndrome it's very, very real. It's scientific, right? Sort of a basis behind it. The lack of confidence. So I think there needs to be an even more deliberate attempt or efforts from an organization to support women, recognizing that they are wired differently from men. It is not tokenism, but it's just recognizing that different environment. So whether is it mentorship programs, whatever works, right? Whether is it coaching programs, whether is it senior leadership, stakeholder buy-in. There are various levers and tools. It's all out there. There's no silver bullet, but a couple of little smaller things, so to speak, all pieced together that can help create a culture change for female leaders to rise through the ranks.
Okay. So, Fanny, as you look at your career, what were some of the key risks that you took?
It was really around being willing to change geography, change jobs. I'm someone who sort of, is happy to stay in my comfort zone. There really was never a real reason for me to leave the organizations that I was in previously. But taking that risk to step out and change a company and to change a role, it's always a big risk because you're new to everything, right? So
Yeah.
you don't really know if you do well. So I think that for me personally, it hasn't been easy, and it was a risk. But I'm thankful each time I did, because I think colleagues have been welcoming. Organizational culture has been great, and I've enjoyed and sort of gotten to where I did because of the risk of
There you go.
of moving. Yeah.
Yes, there you go. Yes, because I think it's an important lesson for women leaders, actually all leaders, but sometimes taking risks, calculated risks that you've thought through, they pay off in the long run. In the short run, you may not see them as that, but they do. So thanks. Yeah, I guess in your case, they did pay off quite well to land you where you are. So it worked.
Yeah, it did. All on hindsight sometimes, right? But like you said,
Of course.
yeah, they all
Of
worked
course.
out very
Okay.
well.
Great. If you were to look back, what advice would you have to your younger self? Something that's like actionable and, something that's tactical, actionable. What is one advice you could give your younger self?
Ritu, I still feel very young,
Okay,
But I'm too young inside.
stand
No,
corrected. No, it's fine.
joking. I'm just joking. Younger self. I think for sure to be kinder to yourself. I think a lot of us feel that way. When I was younger, there's always a feeling, a need to do more, a lot more expectations. I could have done better, and I don't think it's a female or male thing. It's just
Yeah.
when you're younger, that's sort of that feeling, and so looking back, then you go, oh, maybe you should have been kinder to yourself.
Yeah.
The second thing is some of the roles I did, the softer skills that I picked up in my younger days, I think were extremely useful. So park aside the technical skills and the competencies, right, in each of the job, but things like communication skills, framing your ideas, active listening. I've said this many times now.
Yeah.
All of these soft skills, I think, has even presentation skills, for example. All these soft skills have really put me in good stead across the various years, because I guess that's part of sort of building the executive presence, and engaging senior stakeholders and all those. Starting from a young age, I think just helps you to grow that along, and that will help you quite a bit in your journey. These are just all useful life skills to have.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And you call them life skills, and I know a lot of people used to or still call them soft skills, and I actually like to call them power skills, because these, if you start them off early, they become part of you. As you said, they come so handy as you continue to grow in your career and adding to your executive presence. So well said. And I think that is what I can say to our emerging women leaders, is that don't look at any of these skills as, oh, they're just nice to have a soft skill. They're actually power skills that will take you along. Great. So it has been really great speaking to you, Fanny. Thank you again for your time. I mean, I took away a lot, and some of the things that stood out for me, one of them was stay in control. There will be seasons where you will press the accelerator, you'll press the gas, but in some time you might have to let go of it. So select which season you're going fast, which season you're going slow, but stay in control. I think that's so powerful, because it's when we feel we are not in control is where we feel powerless. And that's when it starts to show in everything we do. So that was one of the key takeaway. My second key takeaway was that, organizations have a big role to play. There is no silver bullet, and things are changing, but it's going to take time. So consistent efforts from an organization perspective, and patience required from women leaders' side to see the change, because it's going to take time. We have a lot of work to do. And my favorite was that on networking, because what you said kind of really resonated with me, that networking is not about just going out and meeting lots of people. It's about finding that small group of people who in turn can help open the doors for you. So it's not about quantity, it's about quality of people. So those were the three key takeaways for me from this conversation. Again, there's so much to learn, and it's always a pleasure to talk to you, Fanny. Thank you so much for your time again.
Likewise, Ritu. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me here.